Canadian.
Thanks for producing the producer session.
Yeah,
thank you.
problem. No problem. You know, I just try to do it whenever I can. Yeah, so I guess we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Wayne. I mean, some of you know this, but I'm an actor and a producer. I'm originally from Nova Scotia, but I call Toronto home right now. Yeah.
Very cool.
Claire, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Claire. I'm a writer and producer. I've been in the industry for about 4 years. I pivoted from a 10-year career in live entertainment at the very beginning of the pandemic when I was very fresh to Toronto from Vancouver. So overall in entertainment, it's been like over 13 years or 14 years, whatever that math is. But I still feel like I'm new to this industry in a lot of ways and have lots of moments of, how did I end up here? So, yeah.
Well, I'm Brittany. I'm about a year and a half in the industry. I produce, I AD as well. That was kind of my first love in the industry. I've directed a short film, and I write as well. But for money, I produce an AD.
I get it.
Nice.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I can go next. My name is Malachi. I'm a producer based in Toronto. I grew up in Scarborough, came down here when I started my undergraduate at Ryerson, TMU now. And I've been producing basically since graduated. I also graduated in 2020 into the pandemic, so it was fun breaking into the industry at that time and figuring out what the heck I'm going to do with my career. And yeah, I've been producing a lot of narrative shorts, and I've worked at a lot of different companies as well too, both professionally, so production companies, but I'm still an independent filmmaker at heart, so love that.
Classic.
Nice. Well, hi, I'm Júlia. I'm a commercial producer, so I started in music videos. I'm about 4 years in the industry. Started in music videos and like narratives and shorts and kind of freelancing and the freelance world of everywhere that producing kind of takes you. And now for about 2 years, I've been in the commercial world here in Toronto.
Nice.
Amazing.
Very good.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, I mean, you spoke about kind of working in more kind of corporate settings, and then now you're kind of going more freelance and kind of like producing more narrative stuff. I'd love to kind of like talk about the differences between more professional contexts, like you worked with E1, you guys are both kind of like working with like commercial companies. So that kind of, I'd love to kind of just explore what the kind of differences are and where your passions lie. And as a starting off point.
Yeah.
I mean, like with I would say the prod cosign in the narrative space is a lot different as well too. Like, where do I start with this? It's like, I feel like when I started into the industry, like learning how to like produce and learning what the kind of like space was, I immediately thought to myself like, oh, I'm interested in television and movies, so I looked to like the companies that were doing all of that, and so not many like commercial houses are going to be doing like feature films or like television shows or even like short films as well too. So I looked at those companies. I found this Black-owned company that did a lot of like training and mentorship and everything there.
Was this Oya Media Group?
Yeah, Oya Media Group. And it was great working with them and learning like the steps of like producing and what it looked like from an independent and creative space on narratives. They also did a lot of documentaries. They come from a doc world as well too. And then I transitioned into then working on like studio productions. I worked on an FX TV show. I then worked on like some live entertainment, some reality competition shows as well too. It's a couple of companies like Marble Media, Insight Productions. And I'd say like the difference that I notice a lot of the times there is it's a lot of you're really, at the end of the day, doing things for creative, and everything comes creative first and foremost. And everyone wants to ensure that the creative is met to the style and standard that they're like.
In more corporate or creative? In
more creative, like I would say, especially in that end. Like people at the Prodcos, at the production companies like Marble, like even though they have like bosses, like broadcasters, like the broadcasters ultimately still want creative products and something that really sells interest in like the story and all that. Yeah. Whereas my experience on commercial side is like, how can we make money from this product?
Right. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I started my paid journey in this industry in commercials, which is something I didn't anticipate doing at all. We mentioned it earlier. I was like, when I get into film, I'm going to be the artist style. I'm going to make films. I'm going to do short films. Then I'm going to go into movies, and I'm just going to do that because that's like what my soul has brought me to. And then I actually started doing some commercials, and I was kind of like, you know what? Like, this is still pretty damn creative. And I'm only there for a day, 2 days, 3 days, and then I get to go into the next thing. So I think joining the commercial space was I had some biases against commercials when I didn't have any experience at all. But now that I've actually done it, it's like I get to be on more like varying degrees of creativeness. There are some that, you got to pay some dues. You got to do some like corporate interviews and things that maybe don't like feed the artistic soul as much. Maybe not for me, at least. But commercials are kind of where it's at for me for creative. Like, of course, I love working with actors, and I love, being on like the long-term sets where you're really like, you have to delve into it and see each other, like, kind of go through it. But, I've actually worked largely with food in the past year and a bit. So I kind of took a step aside from the acting side and was like working with like, I'm going to throw a burger up in the air in slow motion with a robot arm, which was something I never even knew they really did until I started being a part of it. And, there's a lot to be said for non-narrative creativity. Although it is kind of the more expensive ones, right? So you don't necessarily get the access to it as soon as you do with the narrative world.
Right.
I'd love to know, like, when you talk about that, what did you just say? Sorry, what was the word the creative?
Non-narrative creativity.
Yeah, non-narrative creativity. Because, like, I think for me and for some of us, I think who have done, like, well, you yourself who have done, like, a short film as well, too.
Yeah.
Like, when you do development for it, you're, like, working on the script, and then you're bringing in, like, your production designer and all these elements, and they feel, like, very creative, like surrounding like this narrative. What's those steps like, and what does that look like in the commercial space as well too? I'm curious.
I mean, like, of course, I still consider myself to be very green in this space, but I think depending on like the product, it really changes. Like, as I said, I've been in like the food world, so our focus is making food look delicious, yummy, whatever. All these things like, oh, I want to eat that. And a lot of it is more focused on the aesthetics, of course. Also just in terms of like, you want people to like feel and taste the product without actually doing those things. And in some ways you have to get pretty creative to do that when you're working with a frozen food item, for example. Like, I've done a lot of stuff with M&M Food Market, so everything is a frozen food. So it's not going to be, fine dining, like beautifully placed, like, wow, the garnishes are just insane. And so just having to work with creatives and like, okay, how do we take something that even the client is saying, this doesn't actually look that good, but like get your food styles to figure it out and make it look good. That's definitely something that like you have to be covering from all sides. Like, we have to get specialized lighting. Like, we have to treat them like talent, these food items.
Nice.
And like really cater it to, I mean, there's maybe like Marilyn Monroe had very specific lighting setups for those things. Like, clients will come to you and be like, this type, like this food item, you have to shoot it in this type of way because that's how we know it looks good. Right. So have this type of lighting, have this, and the rest is up to you. So it's really interesting treating food as talent and kind of being creative with how do we, work with that when you can't just be like, hey, can we just shave the eyebrow a little bit there or whatever. Like, you're working with something totally not alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Get the good side of the bun. That's so damn.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
the
that's
amount of
always
buns, the amount of resets and having to like buy, like literally like buying the perfect bun. Like, that's the bun that we're going to use. We need 20 more of that type of bun.
Wow.
Like, it's food, like, yeah, the food industry is really, really interesting. Very tedious, but very, very fun.
Yeah, food commercials are really fun.
Yeah.
I remember like working on yogurt commercials and
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
you're piping it like a cake.
Yeah.
And it's just like the most perfect thing.
Yeah.
You have to do it like seconds before you start rolling so it doesn't start to like, it's actually a very orchestrated.
As someone who's lactose intolerant, that sounds disgusting.
And actually in that, the talent had to eat it because she had to be like, delicious. And we had like a spit bucket.
Bowls.
Like,
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
Where they just, like, but she
Wow.
actually ate basically every spoon, which was
Yeah, I would have lost the job.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I had to get like Lactaid and Pepto-Bismol to have on the side
Nice.
just in case she like had a stomach ache
Wow.
after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put that in my rider now.
Yeah, exactly. Pepto-Bismol, always.
So I feel kind of green as a producer in the sense of like, I feel like my background is I'm a performer, and the way I got into producing was I just wanted to make my own stuff. And so I feel like when you guys, or when I've had conversations with some of you, it's like, I feel like there's a different skill set. Like, I feel like what you're talking about as a producer is very different from what I consider myself as a producer, which is like, I can get the job done, but I'm not thinking about it in the way that probably a commercial producer is, or like when we've talked about you being an E1, like that kind of like, that being in that kind of corporate setting and going like, I have a very delineated track. I know exactly what my job is. And like, this is what I have to execute, as opposed to, I feel like in narrative or creative, or specifically the producing I do, I feel like my hands are in everything. And I'm like also on set moving everything. And I'm also like, you know, delivering, returning things at 1 a.m. and I'm also doing, you know, many jobs. So do you feel like that plays true in the commercial world? Or do you feel like that delineation has helped you kind of like get really specific about what your roles are in other projects? It's kind of a...
I mean, I'll speak for myself. I think it's also kind of just up to the kind of person you are, like how willing you are to kind of step outside of your role. And I know there are certain teams that really prefer like stay in your lane, and there's spaces where it's like, yeah, that's your job, this is my job, and we're just going to do it to our best ability, and that's going to be what works best for us. But I think when it comes to the commercial world, it's definitely a challenge. Like you mentioned, like not feeling passionate about a particular creative, let's say, and having to push through that as like a commercial producer, where it's like, I've been hired by a client, they have very specific rules, like I can only work with a certain color palette, there are certain colors I can't use, like blah, 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 blah. You definitely have to kind of eat it a little bit. But it's also kind of just like a new puzzle and a new challenge. Like, for example, I've worked with Dairy Farmers of Ontario, and one of their big things is that you can't use the color red ever. Because, you know, technically animals and red, you think blood, you think killing animals. And there are certain organizations like PETA, blah, 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 that like they will pounce on that. So having to like work with like a very specific color palette, like, you know, for other kinds like fonts, like certain even, you know, like lighting styles, the way that, you know, their talent should look, like there are certain things that you have to work between. But it's kind of like, okay, yes, and here is my extra spice that I'm adding. And that's kind of what people hire you specifically for, or what you hire your team for, or the agency or the production company, whatever. But, you know, it can be a challenge sometimes. And I think in like the narrative world, like that's something that like you can really like be really fulfilled in that way, like much easier, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I was going to say on the topic that we were saying of creativity kind of, you know, being
Just
lesser.
a second, everyone. There's one on the mic.
Oh.
That I need to check.
Oh, no.
Okay. No worries.
Hold
I
that
think
thought.
it's yours.
Mine? Oh.
Yeah.
Great, I can cough.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You were saying creativity.
Yes, I was going to say that I feel like having the specific roles in the commercial industry kind of allows for that creativity to kind of be able to flow. It's kind of like, you know, that saying of like restrictions creates more creativity. I feel like, yes, you know, sometimes you're given this script that is for something that like maybe isn't the most exciting thing, isn't the sexiest thing, isn't the most creative thing, you know, but within that you have to make something really cool. And like nowadays commercials more and more, like they want them to be like movies. Like we get scripts all the time that they want like a cinematic DP, a cinematic director, like they're pulling references from like, I recently got a deck that they wanted a commercial to look like a Yorgos Lanthimos movie. You know, like they want that more because, you know, there's so many commercials being churned out, like the turnaround time is so fast that like, you know, you get through a trend or you get through a thing like so quickly that it's just constantly evolving. And having those separate lanes allows, you know, the creative team, like the director, the DP, like the stylists, the PDs, you know, to be able to kind of take this small box and be like, okay, well, how can I like push it to the max, you know? And I think having those separate lanes, or like especially as a producer, you know, because some of these scripts, like, they can be like a movie, you know, and like some music videos, like, literally are like a movie, but it's fast and it's short. So, like, having those specific lanes are essential, you know, and it lets me be able to do, like, I'm doing just this, and I know who to rely on for just this, and we all can, like, work like a machine, rather than, you know, being kind of distracted or feeling like you have so many things on your plate because not only are you producing, but you also need to go pick that thing up.
Yeah.
And on set, oh, I'm also going to be tracking time. Or like, oh, I have that piece of wardrobe in my clothing, so like, I'll bring it, you know? And I feel like that doesn't really happen in like the commercial world because there's like so much to do in each lane.
Yeah.
But it allows like everybody to be kind of at their best in their own lane and take this world that like isn't that creative and just make it like fun and crazy, you know, like there's some like crazy stuff that we get up to. Not that we're making movies or, you know.
Hey, there are movies in their own right as well.
Yeah,
too,
Very
exactly.
short ones.
They're little movies for sure.
It's interesting that kind of contrast, right? Like you have this like Yorgos reference, and it's like I think about as a filmmaker, it's like so much of what I'm doing is like scrappy and like filling so many roles and trying to create something that's like aesthetically specific that will then be co-opted by a commercial agency that has way more money than we ever
and way
had
more
to make that
people as
film.
well too. Like it's
Yeah.
wild to think that like Yorgos or some people who are trying to do that kind of creative style will have like a team. Like my ever first short film was like maybe a team of like 5, 6, like 10 people if anything, and we're going for like a very unique, very like cinematic. I tried to do a fight scene in a like grocery store, like with a small amount of people, and then I'm imagining if that went somewhere like
commercial,
to a commercial, it's a crew of like 30 people mimicking that look to get like that's just to get that same cinematic style. Like that's it's so interesting to me.
Well, it's kind of like essential to be able to do that in a small way because with commercials, it's sometimes the opposite. Like you get ideas from like agencies, like you were saying, kind of how does a script kind of develop in commercials, and usually it's coming from a creative agency. Like they spend months testing and writing and doing all these different things for the client. They kind of narrow down to one, and then they start bringing it to the production companies and to the directors. And I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
You're talking about kind of like creativity. We were talking about co-opting. We were talking about fighting in a grocery store.
Yeah.
And having a like team of
fighting
people.
in a grocery store. Yes. So a lot of the times we'll get things like now, you know, if you really want to talk about the root of all of this is it's always money, you know. So, and nowadays the budgets are just getting smaller and smaller, and we'll get the opposite. Like we'll get people being like, I really want to make, you know, this, but we only have this. You know, and a lot of times they'll pick a reference from like a director or something. They'll be like, oh, I loved how this looked. Like, we want to do something like that, but we want to do it with 5 people. And we'll be like, well, it was done with 40.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, it's the opposite usually nowadays in this like post-COVID era, because like budgets are getting smaller right now, like inflation, whatever.
Well, also
we
just
can talk about it.
oversaturation.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah, so it's like, it's kind of moving the other way now, where people need to find ways to do it with less people, do it more run and gun, because the talent is there. You know, like with the cameras now, and like with the people, like everybody, that creative, you know, juice. Like, of course, at the end of the day, like you can talk about forever about like compensation and like obviously like being paid adequately is like a whole other topic, but that's kind of like where it's moving a bit in the commercial world, is like wanting to do it or needing to do it, you know, in a little smaller footprint, and having those talented and creative people be able to like think that way, you know, as opposed to the opposite.
It's interesting. I think maybe let's have the sustainability conversation. You know, I think like I know you've switched careers, and so the sustainability of working with something like Live Nation and then now being in this place where you're kind of independently producing. What was that choice, and how did that, do you feel like it's a sustainable choice for you, or?
You mean like financially?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I think we have to get into it at some point in terms of like, you know, like there is the function of producing, and then there is the sustainability of being a producer for a life choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A career choice.
I think I had the benefit of going from one life-consuming career to another life-consuming career. I've never really had a clear boundary between my personal and professional life. I usually surround myself with people who work in the same field, and we end up working together. it's so that wasn't so much of an adjustment for me, whereas I have friends who have transitioned to film and television from completely different industries where you're clocking in and clocking out, and so I think I had that advantage.
Right. You were primed.
And I've always just I've always just looked at my career as my career, not a job.
Right.
I've always been thinking like very long term about it. So I try to, people close to me might disagree, but I try to pace myself because I'm looking really far ahead. So I try to keep it sustainable, but it is really, really hard. Like I feel like I'm hustling so much all of the time. And there's very little things that I'm working on. Like I'm always working on a whole bunch of projects, but very few of them are actually making me a living wage, to be real, as like an emerging level producer.
Yep.
So for me, I balance that out by working as an assistant director as well. So I'm a member of the Directors Guild of Canada.
Right.
And typically, things really changed during the strike, and then since the strikes, it really hasn't picked up a lot.
No.
So I've been doing a lot more ADing in the indie world, which has been great for growing my community in the indie space.
Yep.
Been picking up commercials here and there. But I find that the only way to keep this career sustainable while I'm still at this like emerging level is to have essentially like the day job. But I want my day job to always be in the same world, because every single set that I've ever worked on as an AD, I have learned something that I can apply to my producing career. I'm meeting crew who I can potentially partner with, and creatives who I can potentially partner with. I'm reading like scripts that, there's so much to absorb as an AD. So that's how I keep it sustainable. But sometimes my weeks are nuts, and I'll have weeks on end without having a full day off. Malachi and I are producing a short together right now. And, our Zoom meetings are often like weeknights at 7 p.m. or like even a Friday the other day. And Saturdays,
Weekends.
Sundays, it's the same thing with my other producing partner. Like we're all doing multiple things because we have to, but luckily there's that level of understanding between us, and we just know that we're just,
It took a long time for me to realize how to become like a sustainable producer as well too, and I realized to do that it's surrounding yourself with other producers. Like it really, at the end of the day, it's like you cannot do it alone. Like I've learned the hard way, like that. Yeah, the small teams are great, or like the single producers are amazing. Like when I first did my very first project, I thought to myself, let me be the writer, director, and producer of it. Biggest mistake of my life. I regret it immensely. Like if I just, it's just for me, I think it just didn't work because of the skills that I know are needed for those roles, and the skills that I have, and realizing that like if I don't have a good skill at something, I need to find other people to fill those gaps. And so surrounding myself with other people that are good at certain skills, and I complement the things that they feel that they're lacking on, like that really strengthens a team and makes you feel sustainable. Realize that I can take a break and not answer this email right now because this person's going to answer this email. I can not jump onto this meeting because this person's going to be on this meeting. I don't have to be on set every single day because I have another representative who I can trust and feel confident with, who's going to get things done at the same time on set while I'm taking care of other things or other responsibilities. Like surrounding yourself with other producers as well too creates more of, I think, of a sustainable life. The money aspect, not so much, but that's again like the juggling of like choosing the right projects that both that sustain you in terms of like the wages that they're paying you, the creative that they pay you. Like at the end of the day, it's a choice as well too to what projects I bring on my slate, and the way I choose that is like the people, the project, and the pay. And at least two of those things have to be there, and if they're not, then it's not coming on. Like it's people are paid, that's great. Maybe the project's not amazing. Like, for example, like once did a commercial, I didn't love the experience, but the people and the pay sort of were like decent.
Yeah.
And so that's why like I did that project. But if like the pay's not great, the people in the project better be amazing. I better feel like connected with the story and really like in touch with like the people that I'm working with, or feel a really strong relation to them.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like you're in a sustainable position? Like you've been this year and a half, you've been doing it for 4 years. Like, do you feel like by working with kind of more established agencies, you can be like, this is my job?
Yeah, I mean, I think I may have a bit of a reverse experience because I actually, well, technically I'm 2 years in the industry, but I wasn't full-time in the industry until the past year and a half, and I actually started as a full-time job. So I actually started not doing the hustling and you know, the freelance stuff until actually today. Today is actually my first like formal day as a freelancer. Oh my God! So like yesterday was like my last day in office, and that was a 9 to 5, and I'm very thankful for that, especially like given how much like strife our industry has gone through with COVID and the strike. So I was very fortunate. I was able to kind of evade that. Very just really out of an unremarkable story and just kind of luck. But now, I mean, I feel like I can't really answer that question. I'm hoping I'll find a way to sustain this role in this industry, and, you know, being here today is a part of that, because, you know, as you were mentioning, like people, like this, I always like to say that like video production is like a team sport, like it's an endurance team sport.
Totally.
And you like cannot do anything in this industry alone. So it's kind of like, it's all about the people you know. I think you kind of hear that. You hear that in film school. You hear that just like in general, like, oh, it's all about your network. So, I mean, I'm going to find out. But I'm sure you guys would have a lot more to say about the sustainability, because I'm kind of just finding out now.
I mean, my advice to you is like, create a slate like as well too. Like for me, I know that I know what my income is looking like for the year, because I know which projects are going to production when. I know what fee I'm making on those. At the same time, I just brought on to a full-time job because I realized that the amount of projects I have aren't going to sustain me for like creatively. Yeah. So it's finding as well too, realizing early as much as possible when you feel like you're going to have that gap, and making that decision of whether, like for me, I do a lot of bouncing in and out of the independent sphere and at a production company. Like Wayne had mentioned, I worked at E1, and then I left E1 to go be an independent producer. And then I partnered with a smaller independent production company, Fate Pictures, and started working for them as a coordinator. Then I left and then started working independently again, and then got picked up by Bell Media and did some development under them, under their Crave and CTV team. And then I left and started doing independent stuff again. Like I do a lot of jumping back and forth, because I really do love the independent space and like creative producing and being a part of these projects. But at the end of the day, like if you can't yet find the way for that to make your bank account to like really get the like big producer fee on like that feature film or television series that's guaranteed to go, find something that's gonna actually do that.
And I think what you just described right there is like one of my favorite parts of this industry, is that like it's so flexible, and like if you're finding something's not working, okay, try something else for a bit. Like you have the freedom, and there are not a lot of industries that can say this, that like, oh, like if my full-time gig doesn't work out and I want to explore the freelance, I'm going to do that for a bit. And you know what, if I need to fall back, I mean, it sounds a bit silly to say, but if I need to fall back into a full-time, like I can do that. If I want to swap roles, like I have a network, I know people that can maybe give me my first shot at doing this new role. And like I'm someone who like wants to have kids and blah, blah, blah. And the fact that, you know, we can do more roles like remote now, like because of COVID, and like maybe I won't AD forever because I'll need to be on set, but I can produce remotely and I can do all these things. Like there's so much flexibility, and we can all kind of be hybrid versions of ourselves in these careers. Like I don't think a lot of other industries can really say that you can do that. You can try things and fall back, and try things again and fall back, and just kind of do it all throughout a career. I mean, I just love that about this industry.
When I first transitioned and was trying to wrap my head around the whole landscape, I actually felt overwhelmed by choice.
Oh my gosh, there's no path.
Yeah, there's so many different areas. Like there's commercial. I found when I first transitioned, the easiest place to immediately get my foot in the door with no experience, although like producing live events is arguably like transferable experience, but was in reality, like working in unscripted. Did some of that. And then working on like the non-union like movie of the weeks and stuff. And I'm like, there's already so much to absorb in this non-union world, but all those different areas, all the jobs within those different areas. And then I joined the DGC. I'm like, oh my God, now I'm like, my whole world is cracked open even more. And there's so many different areas I could go here. And it took me a while to just even have like a remote understanding of the full scope of all the options that are available. And then when I joined the CFC, Malachi and I are both alumni of the Canadian Film Center, Producers Lab, different years. But when I joined, then I felt sort of overwhelmed by all the different kinds of a producer you can be, because there's so many, like Malachi was talking about, finding a producer who complements your skill set. Yeah. There's so many different kinds of skills that are required of a producer, and lots of times we do kind of need to have to wear all the hats, like you were describing. And sometimes we have the luxury of honing in on a couple of them. And so that can be overwhelming as well when you're just kind of figuring it all out and what direction you might want to go. But at least it is flexible. You don't have to be married to one specific lane forever. Like when I was first kind of figuring out, I was like, okay, do I need to decide like that I'm going to be like features or television? And if I'm doing one of the two, like, I'm really passionate about comedy. I'm like, am I like typecasting myself or limiting my options if my slate is only comedy? What if one day I decide I want to like start doing horror or whatever? Like, it was a relief to realize like, no, you can. There's no rules. You can really do whatever you want. And I love hearing about people who have like really diverse backgrounds in film and have just like tried different things for while it worked. And
I love to hear from each of you as well too. Like, but Wayne, I'll start with you. Like, what the project was that made you feel like you wanted to make the decision of doing producing as well too. Like for you, you talked about a lot how it's a lot of their own projects a lot of the time, where it's like you just wanted to be in something and do it and get it done, and in order to do that, you needed to be a producer to do it. Like, what made you make that decision, and what made you also like stick with that decision? Because I know you've done it multiple times now as well.
Yeah, so I think I'm on my like 25th project that I've like made, like in varying capacities. So I've been producing for almost since 2015, so almost 10 years. But again, like a variety of mainly narrative and then documentary. And I guess to answer the question directly, I don't know if there was like a particular project that was like the click over for me, other than the fact that it was like my natural personality is a finisher. Like I really don't like when things sit dormant somewhere. Like I have a slate of projects in my mind that I'm like, these need to get done before I die. And so if I have time to do them, I will do them. Nice. And I don't like when people are like, oh, we don't have this, or we don't have that. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'll just get it done then. Like if they're like, I'm just that kind of person. Which I think what started to switch for me in terms of my art practice and in terms of my like making stuff was grants. Like as soon as I started to realize that I could get money from people to make my projects, and all I had to do was really like sell them on the idea, that was when things opened up for me. Like I remember early on, my friend Denis Theriault, who's a fantastic filmmaker, his project I Am Sid Stone did really well on Out TV, and we were pitching a project in like 2017. We'd made a short film together that I produced, and then he had a feature version of that, and we were the inaugural year at Inside Out's finance forum. And I remember going and Denis being like, I don't really want to talk to any of these people. And I was like, I'll talk to everyone about the film. And so I was like labeled the producer. And I was like, great. So I'm like, I'm going to tell you about this film. I'm going to tell you about this film. And I got a real like big high from that, of being able to go like, this is my friend, he is a great fucking film, you need to watch this film, you need to support this film. And I was like, oh, well, if it's that easy, like if it's just that, if it's just selling the idea to people, then I think I'm pretty good at that. So it's really, I think, transformed out of that moment of being like a hype man. I think that's why we work together. It was like Malachi and I just finished a film together. It's in post-production right now, but I think so much of what I think made our relationship work well is that Malachi and I balanced each other out, but also I feel like Malachi's a good hype person. And so it's one of those things where I can...
I really love it.
Like, I think it's like...
smile.
Yeah, you know, when you're excited about a project, you're excited about an artist, I think, like, that level of producing is what really excites me as well. And I think that's how I choose things. I tend to be really picky about what I work on because I think there's a huge disparity. Like, I think people need producers because they don't know how to finish something or they don't know what to do, or like, I have this idea, but I don't know how to get money for it, or I don't know. And so I think having people like us in the sphere and going like, well, it's a very simple, the scaffolding is always the same. It's just what creative elements are coming into it and how do we kind of fit those onto the scaffolding. So, I feel like I'm tangenting a bit, but I think for me, what continues to bring me back to it is that I don't want to see ideas go to the graveyard.
Yeah.
Like it's so disheartening to me to see an artist be like, oh, well, I guess I can't get done because I didn't get the funding, or, oh, it didn't, you know, I couldn't solve the problem, you know? And it's like, well, I believe every idea is valid, and I think that there is a time for that idea to shine, and then it's just about finding the opportunities for it to shine. And so... yeah, I think like that's what continues to keep me coming back to it, and I want to keep working with people that I believe in their idea and that I think that there's room for it, you know? But a lot of my stuff, I think people think that I'm like making a bunch of things, but a lot of my stuff has been like on the docket for years, you know? Like it's like things are coming together at a certain moment, but like it really is like, oh, this project we've been talking about for 5 years. This project I've been talking about for 4 years. I mean, it's just like the funding came through now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like I've been developing a series that's literally been taking me since like finishing school, and like last year was the first time I had gotten financing, and it'd been like 3 years, and that's just financing for the first script of the series. Like it's gonna take a while. So yeah, it's like it's finding that those projects that and the people that you can say like I'm in it for the long run with, and like
Well, I think, Wayne, like the industry is so blessed to have people with an attitude like you, like that level of determination and I don't want to say optimism because that sounds naive and unrealistic. I think you are. I think you are real. I think you are a realist. But
yes, very much so.
It's really easy for people to get discouraged by the financing system if you're trying to make narrative. You know, there's whether you're trying to make a short or a digital series or a TV series or a feature, there's very limited options in Canada for how you can actually get that made. And so it's very easy to get discouraged, especially when like rejection is just kind of the name of the game. So I think it's awesome that you've identified grant writing as your superpower. And speaking of sustainability, you've found a way to like leverage that superpower and are now like generating income by
Sort of.
honestly hire Wayne to write your grants.
seriously, as someone who's been across Wayne's grants as a producer as well too, like hire, please.
I think that's such a great example of how to make our careers as producers more sustainable. And then you're gifting other people with that hope that they can make their projects, and like, you know, it's just about being resilient and determined and surrounding yourself with the people who believe in your projects and are determined to make it happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's something like fulfilling about being the glue, because like that's what you are.
Yeah.
You know, like you're like, I always kind of say that I don't say that I'm one of the creatives, you know, as much as, you know, you are a part of the creative team and, you know, you're up there with the director and the DP and like you're finding creative solutions. Like the way I see it is you're really the glue and like the support to allow people to feel like they can make their thing, especially in like the narrative and more like non-commercial world. It's like, you know, that's why, speaking of, you know, what kind of made you feel like you want to do that is
Oh, sorry. Hold on, I'll finish pouring and then...
I know, I was like, is that going to come up, or are they able to take that track and just
isolate it?
But what I was going to say is that that's kind of what made me realize, like, oh, I like doing this, and like this is what I want to keep doing. Kind of in this world is, once you find that, you're good at it or you enjoy, kind of doing the organizational part of things, because it's not sexy. Like, you're like just coordinating and organizing and kind of doing all those logistics, but you are like, people are so grateful for like that help, and then in turn you're also so fulfilled and also so grateful that you were like able to help it get off the ground or be able to find something, or like, oh, I know someone or whatever, without doing any of the creative part of it, technically.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about like the value of service and like the
Exactly.
principle of service.
Yeah,
And like,
it's just helping people. Like, that's what I
Yeah.
always tell people, is like, that's what I like about being a producer,
Yes.
is I just like helping people.
Absolutely.
Like, that's just, and I'm in the commercial world, like, I'm not, sometimes, you're selling products and you're selling like things, but that is kind of not the like, I don't even pay attention to what we're doing necessarily, like what we're, like the script that we're selling or that we're doing, because, like that isn't why I'm here. Why I'm here is to like, get together with people that I work with, a lot, or like find familiar faces, or like meet new people and have people turn to me and be like, how the hell are we going to do this? And, fast forward to when you do find that, or you do succeed at it, or you do like get to set, or you get to post and you see it, and just that like camaraderie of like having it come into fruition is like, that's why I do this, like,
well, it's a
that's why
really
I'm here.
magical feeling it's a magical feeling to be like, oh, this little weird that sat in my brain is now a real thing that this team of people came together and believed in. And not just for a paycheck. I mean, we all need a paycheck, absolutely. But when you find those people that are like, I believe in this and I want to see it be a reality, that's when it feels like noble. That's when it feels like, beautiful and exciting. And I think that's, as maybe as toxic as it is, it's like, I think that's what keeps me coming back, is going like, to watch that artist go, that's what I saw in my brain.
Yeah.
And we're like, we made that happen for you.
Yeah.
That's it's a really beautiful, for me anyway, a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Were there any of the cue card questions that people
Yeah, I
felt
was
like
wondering about
burning to?
Let's read over, see what, so who is your favorite filmmaker or producer and why?
Fun one, I guess.
How did you become a producer? I feel like
I think we all
kind of-
more or less answered that.
what excites you about the current climate of filmmaking? What is your favorite experience thus far in your producing journey? What is your definition of success as a producer? You want to, yeah, great. What advice, we do have like probably 3 to 7 minutes. So what advice would you give to anyone interested in producing? I feel like we've talked about this. What was your biggest struggle when first starting out? Outside of producing, what are some other things you do in film? And then what key experiences have shaped your career?
I think I second the success one. I feel like that
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
can have some nice
I think,
thoughts.
does anyone want to talk about like the current climate? This is a tough one to answer because, like I was just saying, the climate is very discouraging and
Yeah.
AI.
I mean, like, to speak quickly to it, I think it goes back to what you were saying in terms of like, it's finding the ways to continue to make things happen. I think naturally as a human being, we have to make things. Like, I think we just have to. So I think the current climate of filmmaking right now is there's so much, film is still a new medium, considerably based in historical art practices, but it is also something that like so many people are watching video now, and moving picture. But it is oversaturated right now. Like there's almost too much to watch, so we don't know what to watch. And so I think right now, what excites me about it is that I think people are going to start moving back to this. How do you make really quality work that like stands the test of time and rises to the top? And so it's exciting to me right now as a producer and filmmaker to go, how do I find the people that are doing that work? How do I find the people that are like, we're gonna like move through and we're gonna try to make stuff that really has power?
Yeah, I think the thing that really excites me as well too is this conversations about like the ideas of adaptation and original content. Like I'm all about like adaptations as well too. Like my brand is based off of like superheroes and adaptations and creative ideas, books, movies, whatever. But there's something beautiful about the adaptation and also the original idea as well in its whole, because like obviously those adaptations at one point were original ideas. Like they were some nugget of someone's idea expanded,
Yeah.
and now people are like reanalyzing what those original ideas are and making adaptations that are in their own right completely original work. Like I look at films like Poor Things, which is basically like Young Frankenstein, and I'm just like, how do you take that concept and create and move it into something that's so beautiful and like completely different than what it necessarily originally intended to be. There's a great work being done right now in the animated space as well too, and adapting like traditional graphic novels or like video games as well too. Like I just started The Last of Us as well. Like if anyone hasn't seen it,
Oh, no.
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Big stan.
And my partner, he's played the whole video game left to right, and he's watching the film, the TV show, and he's just like, this is both the same but also completely different. Like he was crying at moments that he's seen happen already through the game, and I'm
Yes.
just like, I'm watching this for the first time, and you're watching this basically like at a second instance, and it still feels like something completely new to you.
Just wait
But they
till the third
maintain
episode.
I watched that.
They maintain the creators though. So like the original writer of that game is
Exactly.
also deeply
amazing.
involved
Yeah.
in the TV show.
Which makes it original essentially now, because they're really expanding what that is. So I think there's so much that excites me about both original work, as much as it's going to be really hard to find original work with the oversaturation of like adaptations and the amount of media in general. But the idea that like I think we're really redefining what an adaptation is as well too, and making that original in its own way. Those are things that excite
And
me.
again, like in the same vein as original work, I think what's exciting for me is the niche stories that I feel like are coming out more and more. Like I feel like the way that because of this oversaturation, I feel like there's more and more like films and like shows that are coming out with like niche stories that are like personal to like the director, like a lot of like, you know, cultural, you know, stories based in history or based in culture or just like based in very like niche experiences. And I think that's directly related to how access to filmmaking and to funding and to all those things are, you know, getting better with time.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see, you know, movies on the big screen about these like very niche populations or like cultures or like, you know, these subcultures or like these stories that like never had the opportunity to be told on screen. And like that I feel like is happening more and more, you know, like every time we see at the Oscars, they're just like more kind of like underdog films or more like niche stories, I guess.
That makes me think-
Specificity that becomes universal.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that is so amazing, you know, like that, because it is a platform ultimately to tell story.
and
filmmaking,
connect the
you
human
know?
experience.
Exactly.
You know, if you can go, like I just saw Queen of My Dreams by Fawzi Emerza, and fantastic film. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, I wouldn't have thought that I needed to see Pakistan and, you know, these different time periods. But it felt so beautiful. And what I love about the 80s and like also what I love about these different time periods. And it was just such a gorgeous, you know, offering of like mothers and daughters and family and tension in a way that did not feel like, oh, well, I can't identify with this. Do you know what I mean? It was a very specific cultural experience, but also deeply human at the same time. And I think that progress is really exciting right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of progress, another thing that excites me about the climate of filmmaking right now, especially in Canada, is how our industry is just starting to wake up to how far behind we are in eliminating barriers for disabled, authentic disabled representation on screen, and eliminating barriers to disabled folks who want to work in the film industry and write for the film industry. I think one of the best things to happen to our industry last year was the creation of the Disability Screen Office. So I feel really excited about being an emerging producer when like that's getting formed and they're just starting, you know, new initiatives, and like I think there's so much work to be done and catching up to be done, but it's exciting to like be a part of it now.
I remember when like I was starting in the industry, I'd look at organizations like BIPOC TV and Film who do amazing work for like BIPOC folk in the space, but it's so awesome to see like all these different like screen organizations and funds that have like just exploded since like the Black Lives Matter movement and the pandemic, like the BSO fund, the ISO as well too, like all these different like screen offices who are just doing like great activism and support to like producers like myself who are really trying to engage like more communities as well too and tell more authentic stories and ensure that like everyone is being involved. Like I want to see a bunch of screen offices for all different like ethnicities and identities and like individuals just feel like they have a support system to feel represented and feel like they can go to individuals to ask questions or just like to feel to not so that no one gets left behind essentially during this new process.
And that it's organically coming from those communities. Do you know what I mean? Like the Indigenous Screen Office, it's like that's an Indigenous run program.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the issue for a while was you had these kind of colonialist white structures being like, well, let's bring in this community to like, like spotlight them, and it felt very much kind of like virtue signaled and like inauthentic. And so it's really beautiful to see that like these organizations are going, this is what our community needs, and this is how we're going to engage this sector. You know what I mean? This is what we're going to do for ourselves. We're going to advocate for ourselves, and as opposed to having a white structure advocate for them, which has not worked in everyone's favor. Yes. Great. We're at like 50 minutes. Do we want to like quickly?
Yeah,
maybe
that feels like a good question to end on.
Yeah.
I don't know what my answer is for this.
So I have a like quick story that I would share based on like success for me. So I produced a film called Diaspora. It was by Tyler Mackenzie Evans, a phenomenal director.
I've seen the poster for that.
Oh,
I recognize the name. Yep.
Yeah, Tyler and I and Claire are actually producing his next short, which is awesome. But this project, Diaspora, that I had produced, it got premiered at TIFF, and it was phenomenal. It was basically the dream of the director as well too, was to have that TIFF premiere. It was great to impact that vision and everything, and I was really, really, really proud of this project as well too. And it was one of the first times that I took my parents to see a film screening, and the film's a horror. And my dad sat in the audience, and there's this one scene in the film, and I sat next to my father, and I felt him gag. And I realized that in that moment, I was just like, I feel like I've hit that point where I'm like, yeah, because like for me, filmmaking has always been about, like creating visions and like telling amazing stories. But I've always felt that like when I'm watching a movie and if it entices a very specific feeling from me that the creator wanted, then I think that's the success of a film, when the creation and the intention is just like translated through. And I realized that like, oh my gosh, I did that. And I did that to my own father, who does not understand anything about movies, TV shows, or all that stuff. Like he falls asleep during everything as well too, like constantly. And like when I enticed that emotion out of my father, I was just like, that's it. I've done it. I'm great.
amazing.
I could have retired right then, honestly.
I think I understand what you mean. Like one thing I loved about working in live entertainment was I knew that what we were working towards, like the festivals and concerts that we were putting on and like comedy tours, and like we're making people feel something. Like we're giving people, and it's very, very experiential, whether you're laughing or you're like, you're brought to tears hearing your favorite song, or, a song has a really, sentimental kind of significance to it. I think eliciting that kind of a response in someone and just like reminding people of what like the full, human experience, I think that's totally possible in a screen-based entertainment industry as well. So maybe that's my definition of success too.
Yeah, because
like
like some
people feel something.
Yeah, some people have an Oscar, some people like have that TIFF premiere, but like I think I didn't even realize what I wanted in terms of success until I felt that reaction sitting next to my father, and I was just like, I just want people to like constantly feel that when or not discuss, but feel the emotion I want them to feel when I finish when we finish the end product. You know?
It seems like the trend is like an emotion-based kind of like sense of success, and I feel like that's like I would agree with that as well. being like not from, you know, narrative based world, I feel like the way that translates is kind of that same feeling of like the fulfillment is, I feel like success is when you see that in your crew. You know, like seeing that feeling of like so happy, or like we did it, or like, oh, that's exactly what it was in my boards, or like, you know, that's exactly how, you know, how did we do this? Like we got it. Like it looks like how I was thinking. Like that, I feel like is that feeling of success. You know, like as a producer, so you feel like, oh, like, you know, you helped make it happen for them, and like it's here now, and like that feeling of like, you know, done, like we did it. Yeah, I feel like getting that feeling out of your crew, or especially like your director and your DP and stuff like that, is like, that's that feeling of success, I feel like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think of like, what is my definition of success, specifically as a producer, like I think definitely like the way, like the experiences of my crew is really important to me. And I think if I were to be like, okay, if I were to be like a career producer, like spend the rest of my career doing this, and I'm like, what would make me feel like I succeeded, whatever that means. I feel like a lot of it would have to do with like people, you know, seeing my name in their email, being like, hey, are you available? Being like, yeah, I want to work with her again. Like I love her sets. I feel respected. I feel valued. Like I want to be a part of what she's working on. And I think like the way that the people I work with perceive me and like and the faith that they have in me, I feel like if I were to get to a point where like a good amount of people would see like my name and like recognize me and be like, I have faith that she could like lead me in that way, like lead a team in that way and feel good about it. And then I could also like live up to that and do that and be able to just kind of sit back at the end to be like, you know, I got you good food. You know, I've made the Avengers team, and you guys, like, it was a great experience. Everyone feels good, and they want to work on the next thing with me. I feel like that would be success for me. It's just like...
Yeah, it's the best feeling.
Yeah, like being like, you put your faith in me, and I stood up to that, and I did it, and now we can work together again. I think that's... Yeah, being able to live up to people's faith. Yeah, I think that's my version of success. And like being proud of your portfolio and like being able to buy things. You know, it's nice. Yeah.
What about you,
What's yours, Wayne?
Yeah, I would say I'm constantly sitting with this idea of I just want to have fun. Like life is hard enough, and I don't want anyone to have a poor time on the sets that I'm on. Or I think the stories that I can make are hard stories about life, and so I want the at least process around that to be joyous and silly and fun, and like, you know, everybody's paid well. And the last shoot I was on, one of my team members, we were returning stuff, and she was like, you know, some of the other crew reached out to me before we signed on and was like, you know, I haven't worked with Wayne before, like, what can you say? And she was like, I told them that it's going to be a really great time, and we're going to get paid well, and we're going to get well fed, and it's going to be just a blast. And I was like, I love that reputation is starting to proceed, you know, even on these low budget things, that people feel taken care of, because it should be fun.
Yeah, we're so lucky to do what we do.
We're so lucky.
Oh my God.
At the end of the day, we get to make beautiful things that make other people like feel emotions. Like,
Yeah, we're really like doing the thing. Like, we're doing the thing.
Living the dream.
That's how you learn how to be human, you know?
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people say in this industry, like, oh, living the dream. You know, I'm living the dream, but like,
Kind of are.
like,
Actually,
We're making the dreams.
we're making the dreams.
wow, so true.
Okay, I think that's probably like...
And scene.
We're signing off. Is that a sign off? Is that a sign off?
if we were the director, we'd say, and cut.
And that's a
Yeah, let's go again.
cut. Yeah.
But thank you so much, guys. This has been
That was a good chat.
Great.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Thanks, Wayne. Way to
Oh,
Yeah,
no
so thank you
problem.
for being our
No
moderator.
Eric, we're done.
Please stop rolling.